Good afternoon, and welcome to our webinar on new technologies that will transform testing for the better. My name is Josh, and I will be your host today. Today's presenters are Dominique with NelsonHall and Andrew Morgan from Infostretch. Dominique is a practice director at NelsonHall with shared responsibility for IT services research globally with David McIntyre and John Larity. Dominique covers IT services research in the areas of software testing, big data and analytics services, as well as IoT services. He has been a part of NelsonHall's IT services analyst team since 2007, providing comprehensive and insightful coverage of IT services markets in the world. In particular, he is widely known for his extensive knowledge and coverage of software testing, having examined recently digital testing and DevOps continuous testing. He assists both buying side and vendor organizations in assessing opportunities and supplier capabilities across IT service lines. Andrew is the Director of Product Marketing here at Infostretch. He's an experienced leader in strategic analysis, opportunity assessment, and roadmap execution. With his guidance and expertise, he has helped companies expand their digital initiatives to groundbreaking levels. He has over 10 years of experience in working with a wide range of companies, including global automotive, pharmaceutical, and technology manufacturers. Additionally, he has directed the development of market firsts such as life science applications, customer engagement programs, and predictive analytic platforms. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you, Josh.
Before we begin, let me review some housekeeping items. First, this webcast is being recorded and will be distributed via email to you, allowing you to share it with your internal teams or watch it again later. Second, your line is currently muted. And third, please feel free to submit any questions during the call by utilizing the chat function at the bottom of your screen. We'll answer all questions towards the end of the presentation. We will do our best to keep this webinar to the 45-minute time allotment. And at this time, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Dominique.
Thank you, Josh, and welcome everyone on this call on QA and cognitive technologies. As just mentioned, my name is Dominique, and today we'll try to go a bit deeper into what cognitive technologies can bring to QA, to software testing services. So we'll try to identify the few use cases that are now usable and can be implemented as part of QA operations. So trying to go beyond the hype and getting into a bit more detail, so to speak. So let me quickly discuss NelsonHall, because the purpose of this call today is not to talk about NelsonHall, but I guess I'll mention two things. We service both end users and vendors, so we look at the both sides of software testing services, at both sides of QA, and we think this is quite unique in the industry. And also we like to be granular, we like to go into details, and we think, again, this is a differentiator to our competition. But enough NelsonHall, and really what I would like to talk today about is cognitive. And really, when you look into cognitive technologies, well, it's a wide concept with a lot of different technologies backing it. And we've identified three, we're going to discuss today three main elements of cognitive in the context of QA. And the first one is use cases of AI for testing automation. So how do I use AI in a practical manner for automating testing? And clearly, no surprise, this is where the bulk of the cognitive activity has been in the past 2 years or so. And certainly we've seen an acceleration in the usage of those use cases. We'll get back quite a bit on that. The second part of our presentation today is going to be on the context of RPA and testing. And of course, in the past, we haven't seen too much activity around RPA in QA. This is now emerging. We'll talk slightly about the role of ISVs, of software vendors in this space, but clearly this is a way forward. We identify one or two use cases for RPA. And then the third element of our discussion today will be really about it's fine to use cognitive to automate testing, but how do I test cognitive AIs and so forth? So we'll reflect a bit on this, again, trying to take a practical manner as opposed to going to a lot of concepts. So really, this is what we want to talk about today, and really the agenda for today, it reflects what I've just mentioned. So we'll talk about AI-based automation, RP-based automation, and testing cognitive system. So hopefully this is sort of crystal clear and fairly easy to understand. We'll start by looking to the use cases for AI. And by AI, we're taking, of course, a generic view of what AI is, whether it's deep learning, machine learning, and so forth. I'm not here to give you a speech about AI because I wouldn't be able to anyway, because I'm not an expert on AI, but I certainly know how to apply AI to testing. And this is what we're looking at today. So if you think about the majority of the offerings today in AI use cases, they're really around what you call enhanced analytics. You could describe them as analytics on steroids. So this is making sense of the wealth of data you've got in quite a number of systems. So whether you're talking about defect management tools, about development tools we're using, production logs, ITSM tools, and even stream data, you got a wealth of data, and we're starting to see AI now being used to make sense of this wealth of data. What we've seen so far is really more use cases around defect management data, and that's no surprise. This is where a QA specialist will turn to initially. And we've seen two main sort of analytics use cases for AI really in the context of testing. The first one is defect analysis. So really defect analysis in terms of visualization of defects, trying to cluster them, trying to identify to which what those defects are related to. So really cluster approach. Really the start of the journey, because it really gives them a hint to then go and learn more about the defects. So defect analysis, defect prediction is quite interesting too. Again, it's based on trying to analyze data according to a number of parameters, the complexity of the applications, the change in the applications, from one release to the other. Who's developed the applications and so forth, and also from a testing perspective, who's been testing the applications as well. So trying to identify the main characteristics of an application of release, and then link the defects into into the next release. So trying to predict based on history sounds simple, probably not yet as simple as I'd like it to be, but this is the way forward. And resource planning in that space is really once you know what the level of defects you're expecting from one release to the other, then it's easier to plan resources, so i.e. people and tool and licenses type of things, and time durations. So this is really defect analysis is one of the main use cases we're currently caring for AI, and we're also seeing the same type of approach and use cases for anything related to test cases. So test case optimization, really trying to find duplicate of across test cases based on ML technology, test impact analysis, test coverage. I'll mention test coverage, linking requirements and test cases. So this is what we're saying. I probably could have added to this list of two main cluster of use cases: sentiment analysis based on stream data, mostly, and on forums. As for defect analysis, relies a lot on clustering. So this is really the starting point of a journey that will eventually lead to root cause analysis. So this is what we're seeing where we're seeing most of the activity currently. So again, enhanced analytics and or analytics on steroids. And I've gone too fast. So the good news is we're also seeing now AI being used for automation. So that's excellent news, because it's nice to have AI as enhanced analytics, but it's even better to make testing and QA automated. So again, being very pragmatic here, here's the 3 or 4 use cases we've seen so far, mostly being used by vendors and again and clients, right? And again, this is really the starting point. Converting English test cases into a test script, yes, as long as the English is fairly standard. Porting test scripts from, say, UFT to Selenium, and I think Infostretch has one of those IP that automates it. A bit of root cause analysis or false positive analysis. This is where when you think you had a false positive, and the system will automatically rerun the script because there probably was a synchronization issue between servers and the test scripts and the test engine. So this kind of thing. I have to stop here. This is all fine. What matters here is the level of efficiency. So if it's run at 80–90% of efficiency it's fine, because that means you don't have any rework or minimal rework. The challenge is when you're converting test cases into test scripts, for example, you've got an error rate of, say, 25–30%. In that case, you've got a lot of manual activities to correct the work that has been done. So the value of rework, of manual rework, is limited. So I guess what I'm saying is, I strongly believe in those AI-based automation, but the one thing we need to be careful with is the level of effectiveness and efficiency. If it's high, that's fantastic. If it's low, then it's probably not worth it yet. But I have no doubt that in the future that's going to be these are the leading and technologies of the future. To this slide, I probably could have added another bullet point, which is around web crawlers. So we're seeing much more or more frequently web crawlers, in identifying paths and transactions into a website, and then converting those paths into a test script. So that's starting to appear, and that one as well is extremely exciting. So if I had to leave a message on AI, really it's the early start, still quite a number of use cases already, and at the automation level, this is quite exciting because we're seeing now very, very neat type of use cases. I'm moving then to RPA-based automation, and that's an interesting one, because certainly in the past we haven't had much discussion around RPA in the context of QA. What we've seen quite a bit of discussion really is with software vendors, with ISVs, and it's no secret that some of the RPA or QA software vendors are trying to go into each other's field, and there's a good reason for it. Some of that technology is UI based, so it's not that vastly different. It can be applicable to one or the other. So I'm not sure whether there's a convergence at the software vendor level between the two, but certainly there's a growing overlap. So that really brings the question on, where does RPA fit within QA? And I think we need to differentiate. We need to step back a little bit and differentiate between the two. So on one side, you've got the bots, whether the chatbots or voice bots, but really in that case, this is more of a human to machine interface. And we're starting to see clients using those bots to access data, testing data, mostly from a reporting point of view, from an analytics point of view, but it's starting. So is this technology of the future? Probably not. In that sense, it's nice to have. It's probably making the UX, the user experience of testers nicer. But there's probably more to RPA than about, although that could for productivity, efficiency engine as well. So and then you look at workflows. So automating a transaction or a business process from beginning to end. And where we've seen clients and vendors working on several use cases. So really trying to apply RPA and workflows on no surprise tasks that are human intensive or that require a lot of volume. So typically where we're seeing a number of clients using RPA is for test data management, for lack of a better tool, or when the test data management tool is too expensive. So that kind of use case. We've seen also, I've mentioned volume, I've mentioned human intensive task, and there's where what we think the killer use cases of the future is going to be in RPA is when you've got business processes that run across different type of applications. So typically in a telecom service provider type of scenario, when the client registers and for say SIM card, that process up to SIM card launching and so mailing and then activation, that previous process goes across a lot of different type of applications with lots of different underlying technologies, whether they're web-based or mainframe-based and so forth. So this is an area where we think RPA can be used because it overcomes the traditional limitations of the testing tools. For example, Selenium is only for web-based applications. So we think there's potential here, and if any, that would be this approach would be quite relevant to clients that are very process dependent and standard process dependent, such as the telecom service provider industry or the core banking industry, retail banking industry. So this is where we're expecting to see traction around the usage of RPA in the future. As I said, RPA though is still nascent in that case, and there are not too many clients that have used it. But we think that's going to change with time. So we've talked about AI, we've talked about RPA. The next discussion topic is really around, that's fine to use cognitive, but how do you test cognitive? How do you test AI? How do you test RPA? And let me try to respond to these fairly difficult questions, because really we're now starting to learn how to do this. And I think the key challenge for testing cognitive systems, whether the AI or RPA, is not as much how do I test it, but how do I introduce automation to test it? And that's clearly the challenge for the future. So let me take a non-scientific, non-rigorous approach to what AI is. And so on the high level, at a high level, you've got deterministic systems or algorithms, which are all friends. A deterministic system is where you've got an algorithm that for a particular input provides you the output and the same output, or the output you know that you expect. So the algorithm, my input is A, the algorithm gives me B, and I can check it because I know the output had to be B. So that's what testing has been all about in the past. Non-deterministic system, this is a fairly different type of definition. Algorithms that even for the same inputs can exhibit different behaviors on different runs. That's the theory. From a testing perspective, my input is A, but I don't know what the output is going to be. Is that going to be B or C or D? I don't know. And the typical example of this is, for fraud management, for when the tax authorities, for instance, or the banking clients are trying to identify fraudulent persons. They certainly know what they're looking for, but they don't know who they are going to find. So testing that is quite complex. So let me get back to deterministic systems. So I mentioned this is an alpha in the sense, the process is what we expect. So it's meant to be straightforward, and the challenge is about new tools, new methodologies, and investing into things we are not used to test. So let me take an example. For a bot, you know what the output is going to be. Much of the traction those days is about using different languages and accents like mine to make sure that the bot actually understands and provides the right answer. So a lot of the activities on the utterances and the input level. But to some degree, this is something that automation will solve give it some time, and that's fairly reasonable and applicable. The challenge really is when you've got those non-deterministic systems where you don't know what the output is going to be. And this is where we're still learning. First of all, the things that are still being discussed is training versus testing. So these AI and algorithms are all about enough data. So there's always a tendency to use as much data as possible for training, but then it leaves you not enough data for testing. So the rule of thumb currently is 80 to 20%. Is that the right type of percentage of balance? Should it be dependent on the type of AI you're testing? Lots of questions, and also a lot of different ways of looking at it. So let me take an example here. Predictable AI is sort of the topic of those days, where everyone is talking about, oh, I need to understand how an AI comes to a certain decision, if only for regulatory purpose, and that certainly is coming. So I'm expecting this kind of discussion to be bundled with QA, with testing, and we're years away from finding the right approach to this. So this is more work in progress. So I probably want to close my discussion, my part, with trying to look into the future. First of all, okay, I went too fast. First of all, there's a lot there are a lot of use cases being created in terms of AI. So this is every week or so, I learn about new use cases. Even in activities, I would like crowd testing. We're finding more use cases for trying to analyze the expressions and emotions of people on a video, or trying to identify find duplicate and test defects reported by crowd testers. So there's a wealth of use cases coming, and that's fantastic. This is for the better. The second one, sort of conclusion I wanted to make is UX testing is the big one, where I expect AI to make a difference. Largely, I mentioned trying to understand and identify emotions in a video or in a voice recording and so forth. So this is where we see a lot of activity. And certainly I'd leave with the final comment with IoT and edge devices. Certainly there's a lot of effort those days to put more processing power at the device level. And that's fine, but we're going to new ways of complexities now, trying to test these devices that are remote, and we're facing quite a number of complexities in terms of battery life, bandwidth, processing power, although that's increasing. So if only I would say this is the start of cognitive in the context of QA. So do not think this is sort of a hype. I think it's here to stay, and the leading vendors like Infostretch that are investing into AI, I think, are doing the right thing. So that's what I really wanted to talk about today, and I'll leave the floor now to Andy.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dominique. And just for some context for our broader audience, can you give us just a little bit of background into some of the research that you did for your report? Just the type of companies and that you talked with or interviewed, just so everyone knows it wasn't just a quick little survey monkey that you did, but no, it was actual big long research process.
Oh, sure. So yes, so we took so in the past 4 months, we've looked into so let me rephrase. So every year we look into QA services, and this year we look specifically into the topics of AI and UX testing and mobile testing, but really spend a lot of time on cognitive in the context. So we interviewed, I'm trying to remember, probably 70 clients and also 30 vendors. Don't quote me, but that would be sort of a sim of direction. And
Got it.
and so that, and we'll keep on doing this. So we've been doing this for 11 years, and we'll continue doing that. So, Josh, is that responding to your question?
Yeah, that was great. Excellent. Perfect. Great. So now let's go over and jump into the next portion of our webinar here. So my name is Andrew Morgan. Thank you very much, Dominique, for giving us the insight into your research and what you've seen within the market. Josh, thank you again for setting this up and bringing us together here for this event. I know we've seen a lot within the market in terms of how innovation has really gone, how it's affecting companies, how it's impacting enterprises, not just from a development standpoint, but from that testing and operation side as well. At Infostretch, I'm sure as most of you know, what we do is we really look at some of those digital initiatives that you're trying to achieve, not just from a next 6-month roadmap, but 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, what's the real end goal that you're really trying to achieve for your business and what those initiatives are. So just to give you some insight into our innovation and what we've really done in terms of being able to capture what those technical requirements are for these enterprises, for these startups, for these leading companies within many markets, is we've really looked at how we can help them with our expertise. Now, this just gives you an idea of where we've gone throughout our own evolution at Infostretch. But as you can see, over the last almost 10 years now, high focus on application development, cloud, and that IoT, big data, and artificial intelligence that Dominique was referring to. There's still a lot of as some people say, old wine and new bottle type going on with technology in terms of what we saw as predictive analytics and is now considered AI with machine learning capabilities, and where is it really going to go next? How much is it really actually accomplishing versus what it says it's going to do? And same thing with RPA. We talk about the robotic process automation. There's great capabilities there, but a lot of these things mean different things to different people, and it's really about the context in which you're able to apply them and what the benefit is that they're actually bringing to your use case. So in terms of just the market and what we've really seen, and what we kind of have an outlook on is, as we say here, more devices, more connections, more possibilities. Also more problems if you don't have, your back-end systems assured, if you're not, following the best practices and protocols. But we think about it, digital, as we see here, digital transformation is the top priority and, currently underway all the way up to completed. But what do you as a company or you as an organization really can consider completed? When we talk about being done, there isn't really a being done capability in there. Whereas it's really more about how are you now achieving your latest goals? When we talk about being all these new devices coming in the market, we talk about Nest, we talk about potentially even Uber's automated drones flying around different parts of the world or parts of the cities. These are a lot more connections. I know even in New York there was a couple of weeks ago a pilot unfortunately crashed and because of the air conditions, and it wasn't a favorable situation. But when you have all these more devices and all these more connections, it means that there's a lot more possibilities of what can occur. But we also need to make sure that we're developing things that make sure they make sense in how we want to achieve our goals. So an example of one of these kind of use cases that we've seen, a lot within healthcare actually as well, in terms of connecting different medical devices, back-end systems, bringing that end goal or the end benefit to the patient. For example, this is an example of great UX where biometric authentication opens up an application. You then use the camera functionality to scan a prescription, and then in augmented reality, you can reorder your prescription, look at side effects, or contact your doctor about what it is that you're actually when or experiencing while you're taking the medication. Now that sounds great from a user perspective, especially as we talk about how technology is really aiding the efficacy of elderly patients or people with chronic illnesses. But then we think about it from an infrastructural standpoint, an IT standpoint, and a testing standpoint. You have medical authorization, you have electronic medical records, you have shipping, you have point of sale. As you can see, even the inventory adjustments that need to have the specific chain of custody and different regulatory compliance built in, as well as all the different payment and insurance integrations as well. Now, there's even companies trying to put all this type of interaction on a blockchain network, but how do we even test all those capabilities and interactions without it being on a blockchain network? So this is just to give you an example, is as technology is really improving and there are all those devices and all those more possibilities, that also means there's almost exponentially more elements in the back end that we have to test for and assure to make sure that quality is being brought to the patient or to the consumer. So just some insights that we've seen. This is a very interesting tidbit that we found in terms of consumers now owning 3.2 digital devices or devices in general, and think about that from phones, smartwatches, different iPads or tablets, computers, desktops, whatever it may be. Even having Wi-Fi in your cars now, what's really considered devices is expanding quite broadly. And now in terms of businesses that are able to adopt an omni-channel strategy, and that's where you're actually integrating a seamless experience across all these channels. You're actually seeing a 91% greater year-over-year customer retention. Now in this age where digital is king, and you're able to really adapt and broadcast what it is you're doing to your consumers, and they're expecting this immediate gratification. You need to be able to have that seamless experience. For example, if you're watching something on your phone and you add on Amazon Prime, and then you add an item to your cart that you saw within the show, then you go back on a desktop and that item's still in your cart waiting for you, to making sure that you're going to check out, and you have similar items that you may want to buy, or if you want to jump into where you pause that show. Maybe you didn't have your credit card handy on you, or in one of those sleeves in the back of your phone, and so you wanted to just finish the order online. And so you pause the TV. Well, now you have a seamless experience through Amazon where you're not restarting or the program or re-adding these items to your cart. And this is very beneficial in terms of how we're actually seeing consumers stay brand loyal. Now, our customers are asking from the IT perspective to be able to achieve these components, to be able to achieve that omni-channel strategy, to be able to excel in being able to broadcast their digital applications across all those devices, as well as being able to test in those complex infrastructures I detailed before. These are some of the questions that we're commonly seeing and that are constantly being asked to us in terms of shifting their. So as you can see here from the left to right, in terms of being able to shift their approach, what it is that they need to prioritize, the different costs as well that are involved, and really how they're adapting in terms of real-time data and the cloud capabilities. Now, those last two, as we'll talk about a little bit later, it's really around what it is that the consumer is experiencing and how you're able to adjust for those nuances. Just like we talked about that Amazon example, in terms of not only understanding what it is that they last watched or what they last added to their cart, but where are they? Where are they within their geographic location? What other maybe recent histories or items have they purchased that we need to make sure that is added to that suggested list? Not just commonly featured items, but more with whatever item they added to their shopping cart. But what else that we know about the consumer can we add that helps showcase that we're going to provide them a better buying experience without it making it seem like we're looking into everything that they're doing. Now, as we go and we see the different challenges with shifting left. Now, I'm not going to read through all of these, but as we know, agility, quality, and efficiency are the main factors in what we do from a testing perspective, development perspective, and quality perspective, and making sure that what we're doing is able to, bring all of these tools to market. As we've seen, even the way Google Maps has really excelled. They're able to integrate whatever you're playing on your phone into your maps, so you're able to change the song right then and there. Well, that's pretty impressive, but what tools do we really need to incorporate into our testing infrastructure to make sure that we're able to test for that? How do we then incorporate that into our Apple CarPlay to make sure that we're able to have that syncing and not a faulty user experience? Or worse yet, now that cars are so digital that it doesn't cause any other issues under the hood per se. But as you see here, there's a lot of issues that our customers or that we've just seen in the market in terms of being able to understand what it is that they need to do internally to bring these products to market. So what we've done is we've looked at this intelligent testing from entire life cycle. And it's not just, we don't call it just testing, but more intelligent testing of looking at it holistically, looking at it from a cognitive standpoint, and understanding what elements can we enhance and make better. So you see here, we start with our business objective and user experience. We want to know what it is we're trying to achieve from a PDLC standpoint, what it is that we want to achieve from a business initiative standpoint. Then by setting up the requirements and use cases, now we can go into automating some elements. There's tools right now in the market, I'm sure most of you know them, that we can immediately automate the functional and UI components of the testing process. Now, unit and API, those are a little tricky, and you don't always want to automate those right away because, or straight out of the box, because we want to make sure that we have the right connections right away. As well as the capabilities and tools that already exist in the market aren't as mature as some of those within the functional and UI standpoint. So there's still a lot of discovery going on to make sure that we're not just implementing the latest and greatest tool without validating it for our clients. Now, the second component is the creation. Now, there's two ways we look at this. In the top, you'll see what we call the left to right approach, where we have these now these test cases identified, and what we want to do is actually create them by putting them in a system to be able to automate them, have them in our test bed to make sure that they're able to actually run within any regression cycle. So now you see here we use model-based testing within the use case to lay out all the possibilities of that test case. We use ATD or BDD to automatically write the code for that test case, and then can implement, as you see there, ATGH on top of that. Now that's not a new acronym. Don't worry, it's not going crazy in the market. That's just auto test case generation and healing components, like Mabel, like Functionize. There just wasn't enough space there, so don't get too worried. So just the capability to add then tools on top of that test of that application, so you're able to automatically generate and adjust existing test cases as development changes or business initiative change. So now the UI or other capabilities change, and that's what similar to the aspects that Dominique was referring to earlier in terms of the web crawlers being able to look at some of the components within our design, within our development, and to adjust the already automated test cases accordingly. Now, the second part that we actually see quite often, this is more for existing test cases within, or existing applications within the market. In the bottom, bottom of create, you see a right to left approach. We look in the middle, actually in the backlog of, we need to look at the existing test case repository, what test cases have been automated, and which ones are still being done manual. And so we do we work backwards and do a gap analysis using that same model-based testing technique to understand where are we missing our coverage, what test cases are actually obsolete anymore that we don't even need to have in the system, and where can we actually componentize those test cases to make it a much more optimized and efficient manner. Now, the benefit of this is, while there's still a lot of work to be done to make sure that we're optimizing everything that's already in the works, that we can actually add those same auto test case generation and healing tools on top of the application since it's already in market, as opposed to above where we're actually trying to get to market. This now gives us the capability to make us more efficient in market. Now, this all sets up our continuous testing foundation, and this is really around achieving the maximum agility, quality, and efficiency. We look at the entire infrastructure of how we can actually achieve testing in the most efficient and effective manner. As you see here, test data management, environment management, as well as service virtualization and intelligent continuous testing are the main proponents of what it is that we need to consider when establishing our fabric. And this gives us the ability to risk-based testing, for example, which test cases changed since the last release, what failed last time that we need to prioritize. We want to make sure that we're prioritizing our testing in a sense where if it fails, or if we have a high probability that we think it's going to fail, we're able to then kind of shut down the rest of the operations to make sure we fix these components and applications before we run through the rest of the testing. Otherwise, we're just wasting resources. There's no point of running successful tests if we know other ones are going to potentially fail. Secondarily, and then in the fourth part, we now go to our execution phase. And this is where our normal AUT environment. Now, this is where you see a lot of service providers within the industry talking about testing and talking about the application under test and what needs to be done, everything from functional, performance, security, and so on. We also have a thing in there called unsolved testing. Again, wasn't quite sure what to call this component, but it's where a lot of our customers actually come to us because they don't know how to automate some of their existing test cases. There's some of those, very, very intricate, API levels that they don't quite have a library for yet, or they need to make sure that, they're just not quite sure on how to actually set up and execute in terms of the automation of those test cases. And that's where we come in and we actually automate a lot of these existing test cases they've been doing manually that they haven't quite figured out how to write the exact code for. Now, on top of our capabilities to automate a lot of these test cases, now you have the ability to analyze. Once you're automating all of these activities, you're collecting data, you're gathering information, and you can actually do a lot of just analysis on top of what that data you're automatically gathering. As you see here, we have auto result analysis, automated test acceptance, visual verification, just like in terms of the UI and the UX, as well as other components around the dynamic page test profiling. Now, all this circles back into not just risk-based testing, but intelligent test selection. So it's not just in terms of what has changed since last time, but what can we then start looking at in terms of having more of a probability to to fail or to pass, just based off of these high-level analytics. As you see here, once we get into now our optimization stage and we create that feedback loop, we're able to actually have more of a predictive and prescriptive approach. So this means that we're actually looking at what we're recommending from a low to medium or low to high in terms of the priority, as well as what level of resources need to be involved, as well as where it should occur within the testing life cycle. So almost a roadmap or playbook per se in terms of what testing activities need to be done. Now, as you see up top, this actually now can integrate with all of our log and app analytics in terms of what's actually happening in real time. As we're seeing applications pass or fail, we want to make sure that we're able to look at what actually is performing in real life. If it says that it went to a cancel screen, did it actually cancel, or did it just, the app will just close out? Did it actually log in and say verification, or did it simply just go to the account screen? Sometimes it looks like it's doing the right thing, but it's not, from a coding and testing standpoint, but from a real world scenario, it's not quite always the case. So the more that we can incorporate some of those real world statistics and analytics into the reporting, then we're able to adjust or influence and enhance some of these business objectives and consumer experience components for our company. From a testing standpoint, this often looks like new user journey flows within testing, new test cases in terms of how they're specifically using them. If it's not just model-based testing, but also what can we actually influence and prioritize within our own testing activities. Now, going on, or let me just step back real quick. So in terms of being able to make all of this intelligent, it's not just our expertise, but we've actually, opened this up and opened this methodology up to include not only some internal IP that we've created, but also the best tools in the market and that external IP. And from an internal standpoint, these are some of the components and some bots that we have. You see in the top right in test optimization, we have Tobot. This works in that creation stage, in that right to left approach of really enhancing the backlogs. In the bottom, as you see, the automation accelerator and acceptance, and those really around what it is that we're doing from an analyzation and execution component. And on the left, you see the result analyzer and predictive QA, really in terms of what that feedback and optimization is doing to be able to provide us not only with more intelligent results, but also more intelligent items as we go forward. And then these are just some of those other tools in the market, examples of model-based testing like Hexawise, different visual verification, like Aptly tools, as you see there. And then in terms of Functionize on the bottom right, and Enable, those are some of those auto test case generation and healing factors that are able to sit on top of your application. Now, some of those are still coming to market and really expanding their capabilities. Some of them they're more suited, better suited for desktop applications. But as we're seeing AI evolve and really come to fruition, the possibilities are going to be limitless. So just in terms of how we align testing to your business goals, just wanted to touch on this briefly. So as you saw before, we talked about the different components of agility, quality, and efficiency. And as we talked about our intelligent testing lifecycle and how that really can impact your entire business, based off of what it is that you're trying to achieve, we can then program the best kind of roadmap and execution that's needed for you. And then even considering the next AI testing AI in terms of robotic cognitive automation, bot testing, cognitive computing. What is that next step? How do we set out the best testing roadmap or testing evolution roadmap to get you there? And we use things, and to do that, we use things like this maturity model. This just gives you an example of one element. So this isn't so much this is intelligent testing, but more in the execution of quality engineering. As you can see, there's different components here. So we use different models to help you walk you through what it is that we need to help you achieve based off of your goals as a company. And lastly, just to kind of go over the intelligent testing, doesn't just mean AI. We talked a lot about RPA, cognitive components, but as we've seen here, there's still a lot of possibility, which also means there's still a lot of maturity that needs to happen for these technologies. For that to happen, you need people to be able to adjust and train and help mature these different models. Same way you don't tell your 3-year-old to not touch the stove ever again because it's hot, and then he never touches again. You have to kind of reinforce some of these common sense tools, or bring in confidence throughout the entire process to make sure that they are learning correctly and being able to adjust to new scenarios and be able to provide the best results going forward. Thank you, everyone. Let me pass this back to Josh.
Great, thanks, Andrew, and thanks, everyone. I know we have a few minutes left. I want to make sure we get some time in for questions. As I mentioned before, you can simply do that by clicking on the chat window and entering a question, and we will ask it on the call. So let's see, we have a couple questions coming in. The first one is for Dominique. And Dominique, if you could quickly answer this, that'd be great. What is the main challenge for testing cognitive and related technologies?
Okay, thank you, Josh. Yeah, I guess as I mentioned, the big challenges around non-deterministic systems, and these the sort of challenges not only to introduce testing, but because we're going into a world where we don't have a lot of experience. But the second most important challenge is really to introduce automation. So if you introduce manual testing for testing AI, that a non-deterministic AI, that's not going to work long term. So I guess my response is, well, we need to build the experience, and also how do we introduce automation in that space? So that would be my answer to this question.
Okay, great, thank you. Question for Andrew is, what verticals would be most impacted by the shifts? You talked about the shifting left. Was there, in particular, I know you mentioned healthcare, were there any other industries that would be impacted by that?
Yeah, I think telecommunications as well, in terms of, when you talk about 5G, we've seen 5G start to really kind of roll out in a few cities. The devices are still adapting, but the possibilities are really going to be, endless. It's not just going to benefit consumers and other high-tech products, but also, medical as well. When we talk about the ability to transfer that information and have them involved in the ecosystem to make sure that we're providing the best end result. As these aren't necessarily hardwired items in there, so they need some sort of telecommunication built into their product roadmap as well. So healthcare for sure, as I mentioned, just with the severity of the devices, the ability to bring new technologies to market, the analytics that are going to run on top of that, but then also telecommunications will kind of be one of those components, and not just healthcare, but also other industries looking to do similar transformative initiatives.
Okay, great, thank you. A question here for Dominique. How expensive and time-consuming is applying cognitive to QA in your estimate?
Okay, thank you for this. I guess we've seen a lot of the use cases and the incremental steps, not huge projects. So that's fantastic, because these are short-term projects involving few people, few experts, up to 3, 4 max. So we're talking, sub-million, very much sub-million type of projects, lasting 3 to 4 months. So that's the ideal case where the data quality for training the AI is good. Now, what gets a bit more complex is when the data is not good, when the data is coming from different systems, and you need to enhance the quality of the data. So that becomes a different type of discussion. But provided the data is standard, then you're talking very short projects, 3 to 4 months, few people. And that's fantastic. Actually, it's a compelling ROI, I find.
Great, and in related to this, it's funny that we got this question similar to what your question I just asked you, but someone is saying that they're responsible for testing different applications, and that obviously there's some upfront costs both in training and purchasing tools. His question is it better to apply this technology to a subset of applications from end to end, or is it better to apply some AI to all applications under test and see where we get the most bang for our buck? What is your, I'll ask that to Dominique, and then Andrew, if he wants to follow up.
From my perspective, the incremental approach, limited scope is better, because then you're trying to simplify your project and make it easier to understand. So I guess from my perspective, incremental steps, start small, think small, limited scope, and you know what you're doing. That would be my sort of preferred approach.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I think also it's important to understand what it is you're trying to achieve and what you want the AI to kind of potentially do for you. Is it something where you're trying to get, a reduction of your backlog and you have multiple applications, and so you can apply it that way? Maybe it's similar to Dominique said, it's very small scale, but seeing where you can apply it. Definitely depends on what it is you're trying to achieve, I would say. This will really help determine that roadmap.
Okay. Looks like we have room for one last question. That'll be for Andrew. And when it comes to what you're sharing around intelligent testing, with what you propose, would it help or hurt companies with a heavy focus on DevOps initiatives?
I think, again, it actually probably help. DevOps initiatives is always are you doing your best practices? Are you doing your initiatives? What is it that you're really trying to achieve? I think the ability we have here with intelligent testing is to look at everything holistically and make everything a lot more efficient and optimized. The whole goal of DevOps is to be able to be a lot quicker to market, to be a lot more efficient in your own operations. And that's what the whole goal of intelligent testing is. So it'll definitely aid you. We just have to make sure that there's clear understanding. Just like we saw with cloud about 6-7 years ago, when everyone said, let's go to the cloud, and everyone said, let's do DevOps. Well, what does that really mean? What are you really trying to achieve? And if we can understand that and create the most effective outcome-driven model, that's often the best result, not only for the company, but for the consumer as well.
Okay, great, thank you. Looks like that's about all the time we have left. Can you go to the next slide?
Yep.
Just want to wrap up and say, be sure to check out and subscribe to DTV. It's a new digital transformation channel that brings in industry experts. I want to especially thank Dominique and Andrew, and thank you everyone for joining us. You will receive an email in the next 24 hours with a slide presentation as well as a link to the webcast replay. If you do have any questions, please contact us at info@infostretch.com or call 1-408-727-1100 to speak with a representative. Thank you all and enjoy the rest of your day.